How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Tyler Smith. He's a professional triathlete from Bermuda, living in the United States, and he just competed at the Olympics in Paris, representing Bermuda. And it's just a great conversation, getting to unpack the life that he's living, the little bit of a downtime that he's taken to get some things figured out and fixed on the body. And we talk a little philosophy and religion and stuff like that at the end. So a full conversation. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Tyler Smith. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I guess you've technically been on the podcast one time, but it was more in kind of that shoot the breeze model where everybody was just kind of having fun and whatnot. But I'm honored to have you on one-on-one and hopefully get to dig in deep on who you are and what's been going on and things like that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me on. And I guess, yeah, as you said, we did that good Boulder 70.3 recap episode kind of turned into with Chase and Justin. But yeah, I mean, I've been following your podcast for a while now since we met in Arizona back in February. So it's nice to finally be a guest myself.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's awesome. So I guess it's interesting because I haven't interviewed too many people who I've already had somewhat of interactions with. So this would be a little bit different of a feel for me. But still, I'd love to. I know where you're from, but I'd love to hear again, like, where are you from, and give me some more detail about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Bermuda. For those people that don't know, small island, 64,000 people. We're not really in the Caribbean. We're not really in North America. We're kind of our own thing. So, 600 miles or, 900 kilometers east of sort of North Carolina and maybe about the same distance north of Florida. So, we're kind of just out in the Atlantic off the coast of the US by ourselves, and really unique place, I think. Whole mix of sort of people that live here and a really unique culture that's different than anywhere else that I've been, and a country that I'm super, super proud to represent on the international stage. And, we've had successful triathletes. A lot of people in triathlon are familiar with Bermuda because of the exploits of Flora Duffy, who won the gold medal in the women's triathlon in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. As well as other triathletes. Tyler Butterfield, has had a number of top 10 finishes in Kona. So between those two and now myself and Erica Hawley coming up, we have strong sporting tradition of producing world-class triathletes. And that's kind of why we become a little bit known within the triathlon circles for such a small country.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize it was only 64,000. That's a lot smaller. I mean, that's like where I'm going to be moving. Redding, California, I think has 90,000. So it's quite small.
Yeah, it's super small, and that makes it a really close knit community. And it's also a community where people have been here for generations and generations and generations. So you're related to a lot of people. If you're not related, you're very close friends with a lot of people, and it is like being raised by a village, right? And there's so much overlap between what you're doing with people and how often you're seeing them and interacting with them on a daily basis that you really do feel supported when you're coming from a place like here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm also curious with that overlap, like you said, kind of everybody is closely related. How does that affect the culture? And you said the culture is like very unique. So what is exactly the culture?
Yeah, with everyone being very related, I mean, one obvious way is you kind of got to check to make sure you're not related before you start, maybe dating someone when you're in school or something like that.
Okay.
Come back and just double check with your parents, or hey, they're not. We got the same last name, but are we related? That sort of thing. But yeah, I think probably the more sort of important consequence of just being so small is that people are very friendly, and not necessarily because you have to, but because I guess it is like you really know people well. So when you're interacting with people on a day-to-day basis, it's like them, their family, you're probably going to see them again. So there's that kind of mutual respect within the community. And then I think we have our own food and holidays and things like that, and pastimes that we're really fond of, and so there's all those sort of unique aspects as well. But I think for me growing up, what it really was, it's even small things like when you're going out to town. I couldn't imagine just like walking into town in, pajama bottoms or like a dirty t-shirt, because if
Yeah.
you go there, like you're going to see everyone there is going to be someone So, for the older generations, that was always something that, they're even more extreme on and making sure, you almost have to wear a button up shirt and every time you go into town, it's not the
Right.
same intensity with younger generations, but, it's still that kind of, someone's always watching what you're doing. So, that
Right.
keeps you accountable. And I think that keeps you on the right path. But on the flip side of that coin, it was nice to go away to university when I finally did leave Bermuda and kind of have a little bit more freedom and a little bit of a sense of liberation from the small island as well.
Yeah. So when you came to the US for university, was that the first time that you like came for an extended period of time?
So I actually went to the UK for university.
Oh,
So I
sorry.
went to so one of the unique features about Bermuda is we're still a British territory.
Yeah.
We have our own parliament. We have our own premier, which is our head of government, but our head of state is still the king. And we're an independent overseas territory, is how you would call us. So that means that we have British citizenship as well, and 64,000 people. We actually don't have a university on the island. So
Mhm.
if you want to go to tertiary education, you have to go overseas, and a lot of people do go to the UK because we have that connection. So I ended up going to the University of Leeds in the UK, which big hotbed of triathlon. At the
Mhm.
time, that's where Alistair and Johnny Brownlee were. Vicky Holland was there, Non Stanford, and those were kind of the senior athletes. And then through my cohort was people like Alex E. Georgia Taylor Brown was a little bit ahead of myself, Sam Dickinson. So you had a lot of sort of talent in the UK going there, and it's kind of the place to be
Yeah.
around that time. And it was where I landed on going to university, and I just went there because I wanted to do triathlon alongside my studies, not necessarily because I wanted to become a full-time professional triathlete after I graduated. But it was one of those things where I was able to kind of progress through from one of the lower training groups to eventually being training with the guys that were racing on the highest level and getting to go to things like Commonwealth Games myself and now the Olympics as well. But yes, so back to your question, that was the first time leaving Bermuda for an extended period of time. I was lucky enough to train with a group in 2014, 2015 that was based in Canada, and I would go there for 2-3 weeks. But in terms of being away from home,
Yeah.
yeah, when I went to Leeds when I was 18 was the first time.
Yeah. So when you went to Leeds, I'm assuming because it's a British territory, there is some influence and overlap in the cultural norms and things. But you mentioned that you guys you have your own holidays. What kind of holidays do you celebrate that are a bit different?
So the biggest holiday in Bermuda is Cup Match. So Cup Match is it's in celebration of Emancipation Day. So that was the day that slaves were freed in the British colonies. So that is a 2-day holiday, and the biggest feature of that holiday being that there's a cricket game played between two ends of the island, and that's quite a divisive issue. If you come here in
Yeah.
Bermuda in June, July, leading up to Cup Match, which is typically the last weekend, or yeah, it's end of July, beginning of August, depending on where it falls in the week. That is a very sort of divisive issue, Somerset versus St. George's, and yeah, that divides families and it divides friendships, and it's a pretty competitive game. Unfortunately, my side, St. George's, hasn't won in quite a while, but that's our biggest holiday, So there's a lot of unique. It's kind of the one day gambling is allowed to an extent in Bermuda,
Mhm.
and yeah, the whole island shuts down for that. Basically, we also have another holiday, Bermuda Day, which is it used to be on the 24th. Now it's changed a little bit to always be, I think, the last Friday in May or something like that. But that's unique because of a large race in Bermuda called the Bermuda Half Marathon Derby. And this was a race started, I think, early 1900s.
Wow.
And it's a half marathon from one end of the island to town. So that kind of puts in perspective how big Bermuda is, if you want to do a half marathon course point to point, you're pretty much doing half of the island.
Yeah.
And that is a big one. And, you know, amongst us, we always joke, like, I think you could win a World Cup, a World Series, shy of Flora winning the Olympics. I don't think there's anything else you could win that is going to get you as much local prestige as May 24th. It's held in very high regard, you know, and it is kind of this local half marathon, but it's something that, you know, that's everyone's reference point for especially endurance sport. You know,
Yeah.
how do you do in May 24th? And, you know,
Yeah.
everyone does it, from pretty high level athletes to people just running it for charity or just running it as a challenge. So, I mean, I think that between those two holidays, we have other things. Good Friday, you know, it's typical to, go fly kites is a big Bermuda thing. And when you're young in school, you're always making kites, and, you know, you're getting your tissue paper and pieces of wood and putting them together.
Oh yeah, fun times.
Yeah, but I think those two big holidays, you see that both of them are, you know, on those holidays you have big sporting events, and I think that is a reflection of like how important sport is in the Bermuda community, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it's just something that's, and you know, even on New Year's Day and Boxing Day, there's other sporting things going on. So yeah, it just shows kind of the role of how deeply sport is ingrained in our culture, really.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, what was your first interaction with sport and even triathlon? Because obviously you said you went to Leeds, so that had to come into your mind at some point.
Yeah, so I was really lucky. My mom and my dad were pretty involved in triathlon when I was born. Um, my mom went to the Commonwealth Games, which for, I guess, American or non-Commonwealth
Hmm.
countries, the Commonwealth Games is basically the UK and it's all its former colonies. So it's the English speaking world. So it's like the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you know, most of the English speaking Caribbean,
Hmm.
um, English speaking Africa. So those are pretty big. You know, to us, that's second only to the Olympics. So she went to the Commonwealth Games in 2002 and 2006. So from a pretty young age, I was born in 1998. So from a pretty young age, you know, I was going to triathlon races to watch her. We would always be going out to Clearwater on the weekends to watch her, you know, do races, and I would just be in a stroller with some, you know, so many people in the
Hmm.
triathlon community. I guess it's funny because they're like, "Oh yeah, we used to take care of you at races when you were there
That's so
watching your
funny.
mom," you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
so that's, you know, then they get to see in the Olympics, and it's this real like, you know, they've known me since I was
Yeah,
3 years
full
old,
circle.
basically.
Hmm.
So I was introduced to it really young, and but I wasn't doing triathlon myself until a little bit later on. So I got involved in swimming, which was, you know, something I think both my parents were really keen to just give me the opportunity to develop the skills to be able to swim confidently, which is really important if you live on an island. You're always around the water. You know, Bermuda's, I don't want to get it wrong. We're 20 something square miles, but basically we're really thin. So you're always within like 2 miles of the shore.
Wow.
So having this go to swim just because, you know, you're going to be at the beach, you're going to be on boats was really important. And I
21
kind
square
of,
miles, by the way. I
yeah,
looked it
I
up.
kind of latched onto that and continued. So after swimming lessons, kind of got a little bit into the competitive swimming and kind of went from there. And in school, we were always doing cross country, but I was doing all sorts of sports. Some I was good at, some I was bad at. You know, I was playing football, like soccer, football, rugby. We were introduced like a weird one. I did inline hockey, so like
Okay.
on roller skates,
Yeah, that's hard,
field
man.
hockey, all those sorts of things. So you know, I just tried a ton of sports, and I think the ones that I was the best at were the endurance based ones. So I was doing a lot of cross country, a lot of swimming. Um, and then probably I think I was about 13, 14, and I started to realize like, oh, I'm not really progressing with the swimming. Everyone's getting a lot bigger and stronger than me, and I wasn't really
Mm.
going anywhere. So I was kind of losing a bit of faith in myself.
Mm.
And looking back at it, I look at the photos and I cracked up, and I'm like, I was the smallest guy on this. You know, just in those ages between 12 and 14.
Yeah.
You know, there might be a 40-pound difference between you and a, you know, 5 inches of height difference. but at the time you're just like, why, you see yourself on the same level and you're like, why am I getting beat? Why am I not getting any faster? I'm training
Hmm.
harder than these guys and they're getting faster than me. So it was really frustrating. And that's kind of what pushed me into exploring other sports. So then I started to try triathlons. In Bermuda, we have this history of, there's a man from the UK, Steve True, who would always come and run a 1 week summer clinic at the beginning of summer. So, just one of those things. Bermuda in the summer, you spend it all. I was lucky enough to spend it pretty much always outdoors. And it was like, okay, I'll try this triathlon camp, because my parents were involved with it. And with my swimming and running background, I was pretty good at it. And then I think like the next week there was a cycling camp and I enjoyed the cycling so much in the triathlon camp that I was like, let's do the cycling camp as well. And then kind of slowly, all three came together.
Mm.
But I was never really still a triathlete. Triathlon's just like one of the 6 or 7 sports that I was doing. And, you do it when the races are on. And we have this race, Iron Kids, that, even if you don't do triathlon, everyone goes and does it because they give out $1,000 to the winner
Oh,
at,
seriously?
at like 14 years old, So it's like,
Wow.
yeah, it's sponsored by a big bank in Bermuda. And, they just put a lot of money. I think originally the plan was, I think, that this money was supposed to be some sort of college fund, start going to a
Hmm.
savings account, but I think it just turned into there's $1,000 for the winner. So everyone's
That's
kind of
enticing.
dipping their toe in it to an extent. And then what really kind of got me into triathlon and seeing the possibilities was there was an opportunity for Bermuda to send an athlete to the Youth Olympic Games, which was in 2014 in China, in Nanjing.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't really, I don't, I kind of took it for granted at the time, but that's what really got me, okay, let me dedicate myself to this for like a year and actually train from the year round, not just like doing triathlon in the summer from May to October or whatever, which is when our like triathlon season is.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I'll ride my bike year round. I'll run year round, even during swim season, and see where I get. And yeah, getting out there and just being a part of that Olympic movement, racing against people internationally, and being like, oh, I'm actually not that far off these other athletes from big countries. And that kind of gave me the push to like, okay, let's see where we can go with this. So then I started doing junior elite races. When it was time to decide on university, I had a really good teacher that knew a little bit about the UK and
Hmm.
triathlon. And she was just like, you should look at Leeds. They have a great program there. And I went there. The coach was great at the time, Liam O'Neill, and he kind of just was a guy that I was, he kind of sold me the program and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. This is, I was there for one day and I was like, yeah, this is where I want to spend the next 4 years, being a part of this.
Yeah. And so going back to when you were, I guess you were like 16 when you went to that, or when you started training for that race, the Junior Olympics in Nanjing, you said, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. 15, I guess I was late birthday, but yeah, 15, 16.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's like, I mean, I can't even remember what I was doing at 15, 16, messing around, playing with gasoline, like crazy, stupid stuff. But for a
Yeah. Well,
15-year-old,
I was also
16-year-old,
doing stupid stuff at 15,
yeah,
16. It's just like interspersed around, a lot of
training.
training. Yeah.
Yeah. But was it ever hard for you to take it? I mean, obviously you were interested in it. There was some level of interest, but people told you about that race and you became interested. What fueled your determination and drive to be able to do such a thing? Because like that's not easy for, at least for most kids, to stay that focused on something.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think, it just is something that I really enjoy doing. It's just I'm a pretty competitive person. I think that drives me a lot. I think the access to outdoors in Bermuda drives me a lot. Like, not to say that there's not much to do. I don't know what else would I do? It's like, as you said, 21 square miles. You might as well just go ride your bike up and down the country. And I found that was such a fun way of spending the time. And also like before you can, drive or whatever in Bermuda, um, yeah, you're a little bit dependent on either like parents driving you around or public transportation. And, when you have that opportunity to get on a pedal bike and just do an entire lap of the island,
Yeah, it gives you
like that just
freedom.
felt like such a sense of freedom, especially if you came from a swimming background where you just like back and forth, back and forth,
Mhm.
back and forth. So I really did enjoy kind of the sort of intrinsic enjoyment of being able to swim, bike, and run. And, swimming's okay. There's the back and forth element, but we have pretty big open water swim races that we do every year. And then, there's a running race, and then there's a cross country, and then there's like cycling and mountain bike series. And it's so many things to do. And I think that just became a big part of who I was.
Mhm.
And that also just became a big part of my community. Like that's what my friends were doing. That's what, other people in my family were doing. So it just became the place to be. Like, oh, it's the
Seems
weekend.
really
Like,
natural.
yeah, we're just going to go to a race, and every other weekend would be a different sort of race. So, and then obviously if you're doing all these races, because I'm competitive, I don't want to just come last. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I just want to win this thing. And, you train, and then you get better and better. And it slowly kind of all comes together. There was definitely periods where it's like, okay, I feel like I'm sacrificing maybe a little bit here, but in hindsight, it's like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think the other thing is I had friends outside of triathlon that were really supportive. So in my group of friends that we all stay in like really good contact today, no one was ever like trying to pull me in a different direction. People
Mhm.
would always be like, oh, no, it's cool. Like, I understand why you can't come, do your thing. And I think that was really important in my sort of career development.
Yeah, it seems like that definitely has to be a part of the culture. And I want to ask kind of a question circled around this because you said sport in the country is a big thing with Cup Day, I think is what it was called, and
Cup
these
match,
other
cup match.
Cup Match. Okay, so
Yeah, cup match.
these different holidays that circle around that, and then your association with the UK, and obviously the sporting world there is huge. For you, as you were growing up in this, well, let me ask you this question. What is the obesity rate actually in Bermuda? Is it lower than the US and then the UK, you think?
I should know this because I actually, when I was applying for a scholarship in my first year of university, I wrote a I studied sports science and physiology at university,
Okay.
and in application to a government scholarship, which I was lucky enough to receive, this is kind of the angle that I went at was outlined that the role that sport can have in Bermuda in improving the health of the island. I would say our obesity rate's probably, unfortunately, it's somewhere in between. It depends. For me, my view of the U.S. is skewed because I live in Boulder, which is like,
Yeah.
everyone shopping
There's
at
not an
Whole
ounce
Foods
of
and
fat
walking. Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just
The average
shredded
body fat
individuals.
percent is probably like 6%. So,
Yeah.
it unfortunately, type 2 diabetes, is really prevalent in our community, especially amongst Black Bermudians. Obesity is also an issue. Um, so yeah, there's definitely room for improvement there. I don't know the exact figures. I would say it's probably in between. Unfortunately, if you look at our infrastructure, um, every time I come back, it's almost like, wow, our road infrastructure is not really conducive to cycling for the general public. If you're a
Mm.
professional triathlete or if you're confident on a bike, yes, but for someone to ride their bike to work in Bermuda is not really feasible, in
Yeah.
my opinion. There's no bike lanes or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, so we don't have sidewalks. The roads are narrow. So even to go walking on the road there's
Oh,
a
scary.
little bit of a limiting factor to that. So we do have parks, we do have public places, and we do have beaches. Not to make excuses, but there is certain elements of our infrastructure and maybe our just like diets, that are contributing to these factors. So sport's a big part, but there's a lot of people watching, it's like do the
Yeah.
sport until you're in 20s and then maybe step out of the sport and now you're a spectator or a coach, but not necessarily getting the health benefits of the sport.
Yeah.
So, I think we have a generally healthy population, but it's something we need to kind
Continue to
of
work on. Well, I
consider.
was just doing a little bit of a Google search, and it looks like you guys have actually come a long way because in 2014 it was in 70 percentile, and now it's 24.4%. So that's like a huge drop. I mean, like a 50% drop in population. So that's really awesome. Like you guys are 67th a country wise in terms of like
Yeah,
obesity, and then the US is 10 with literally almost half the population
yeah.
being obese.
Well,
So yeah, it's
that almost
come a
sounds
long
too
way.
good to be true. But
Really?
well, yeah,
Well, it's
50% drop in obesity, unless
yeah,
people were, uh, I don't
just
know,
dropping pounds.
maybe Flora's inspired everyone. Yeah, who
Yeah, I need
knows?
to
I mean,
look at it more.
Our KFC closed for like 6 months, so
There
maybe
you
that
go.
had a little impact. And that's one thing about Bermuda
That's so
is we
funny.
don't have um,
No
franchise
fast food.
fast food. We don't have
Mm,
franchise fast food, so no McDonald's, no Burger King, no Wendy's. We have one KFC that was kind of grandfathered in when they made this rule. But apart from that, yeah, there's no fast food. We used to have a McDonald's on the American Air Force Base here, and like
of
my
course.
dad will kind of talk about once a month. I guess they would open it up to the general public, and it would be like a line all the way across the bridge to get into
Oh
the
my
base. But
goodness.
yeah, apart from that, no fast food.
That's a good thing. Convenience is the killer of all
It
good
is, yeah,
things, man. Because
yeah,
like, I mean, I experienced that enough, and I'm sure you did too within training. You're trying to get food, relatively quickly. Sometimes you'll go for the cheaper option or whatever, the quicker option, and like that can, if you're living more a sedentary life, that can definitely kill quick.
yeah, 100%. It's definitely one of those things. I took a little bit of time off after the Olympics, and all of a sudden you're like, damn, I gotta watch what I'm eating because
Yeah,
if you're not training like 5 hours, 6 hours a day, yeah,
yeah,
it adds up quick.
yeah. So
But yeah.
let's jump into that because obviously you just had this amazing experience and you had a huge lead up to it. So I want to leave it pretty open to you, but I'd just love to hear about your experience from, kind of when you found out, okay, I'm going, and then your expectations and realities, how they shifted when you actually got there, and then now post Olympics, now that you have it kind of in your rear view mirror, like what have you been experiencing? What's been going on?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Time went by so quick from finding out, okay, you're going to actually just being in Paris to being on the start line. And then it was really only after finishing that you're like, whoa, like all of that just happened. You know, when someone tells you you're going to the Olympics, there's not much time to be like celebrating or soaking it all in. All of a sudden, you have a real specific and definite task to get to, which is training for the Olympics. So a lot of my friends were asking, are you going to be, a week off, celebration? Sure, surely you're pretty happy right now. And it was almost the opposite for me of, okay, you got 6, 7 weeks until the Olympics. How can we optimize everything and just completely, put your head down and get there in as good a shape as possible? So that obviously is a lot of energy, and not just that, but it's a 2 year qualification period for the Olympics. So you're going to all sorts of races across the world, some big, some not so big, and some like really small in random places. And I guess I'm sure there's lots of people that were doing this, but because of my sort of world ranking, I was racing all three categories of races. So Continental Cups, World Series, and you're just not necessarily chasing points, but you have such a clear focus of what the objective is
Mhm.
and what you have to do. And then you get there, you kind of do the race, and it's only after the race that you're like, whoa, that was a huge investment and the culmination of a lot of work. And you
Mhm.
can kind of sit back and look back on it a little bit more proudly.
Are you proud?
Yeah, I think if you get to the Olympics, you have to be proud of yourself. You know, there's only 55 people in our sport each year, male and female. So 55 male, 55 female that get to say every 4 years that they competed at the Olympics. And
Mhm.
if you think about taking a step back, you think about all the people that you were junior with, all the people that you're in under 23 with, all the people that you trained with, and this was always everyone's goal. Um, to get there yourself is something that I'm tremendously proud of. I don't think a lot of people would have thought that I had the potential to get to the Olympics when I started in this sport. And for me, just to get there was a huge accomplishment. Bermuda only 64,000 people, as I said. We had 8 people at this Olympics, which is a good sized team for us. But
Mhm.
it's the pinnacle of all sports. So to get there, I'm very proud of that. And even to just put together a race, be able to finish, and Um, Walk out of there with my head held high was something I'm pretty proud of. Whether or not I was happy with the way the race went, I think that's a different sort of question. And for me, the answer is no, which I can just be honest about.
Sure.
But in terms of having a sense of pride for going to the Olympics, I would be surprised, regardless of results, if there's any athlete, that was there that didn't feel proud. And they should all feel proud because, as I say, this is the pinnacle of sport, and it's what everyone is really working towards and what everyone is dreaming about and sticks on their bedroom posters, and once you come out of the Olympic Village, out of that bubble where everyone's an elite athlete and you're not surrounded by Olympians every day, you kind of go, oh, wow, yeah, this is something special. If you get into an Uber and tell the guy you're at the Olympics, he's shaking your hand and telling you like, oh, I've never imagined meeting someone that went to the Olympics. It's all about perspective. You can be the worst of the best. It still means you're you're in a very high sort of
Very high tier.
tier. Even if you're not on a good day.
Yeah. So how has this changed your perspective just on life? Because like I imagine when you're getting on the plane, like, you're very focused. Okay, here's where I'm going to execute my race. But you get there and there's all the lights, the fanfare, all of the team gear. You get to experience all the ceremonies and everyone around you, like you said, they're on this next level elite status. And then when you're getting on your plane, going back home, there's like, it's just a different feeling. I don't know. Did you feel like almost homesick for it, or did you feel down at all when it ended?
Yeah, I think for me it is interesting because in a way it reframes maybe your expectations around the Olympics and going into it. Maybe you have this idea in the back of your head that just get to the Olympics and everything else is going to be fine. Your life will just be great after that. And yeah, really the Olympics. Okay, you go there, it's awesome, but not much else changes for you. And I think that's almost quite refreshing in a way because it takes away that pressure. Like, okay, if you win it, certain things are going to certainly change for you, sponsorship, money, that sort of stuff. But I think fundamentally, who you are, the values that you have, the friends that you have, your family, that stuff doesn't change before and after the Olympics. And I think it's important to realize that because if you sacrifice all that stuff getting to the Olympics and in the pursuit of victory, you get that, whatever that victory might be for you, whether it's winning the thing or top 10 or top 15 or on a podium. And it's like, you get there, you do that. Is anything really going to change when you step off, right? And when you come back to reality in the real world, and it's like, not all of a sudden all your problems are going to be fixed because you competed at the Olympics. So that's almost refreshing in the sense of it puts a little bit less pressure on yourself because it's like, win or lose, the sun's coming up tomorrow, the world's going to go on. You're going to be relegated to the back page of sports. Ray Gunn's going to be taking up the all the headlines, so it doesn't even matter. You know what I mean? And those people closest to you are going to be proud of you and still love you no matter what. So as long as you conduct yourself with sort of dignity and the ideal values of what the Olympics strives to be.
So I would say, well, let me reframe my question or my statement. I talked to someone who shared that it isn't an uncommon occurrence when an Olympian goes to the Olympics, they come back and then they fall into this depression because, like you're saying, I think expectation was it was going to radically change regardless of the result. Just, I don't know, what was like problems would be solved or it would kind of be the magic pill thing. And then you get back home and because your identity's been so wrapped up in something now that it's kind of evaporated at least for another 4 more years, maybe to your last Olympics or whatever, it can be very tough on a person. But you strike me as someone whose identity isn't really fully wrapped up in what you do. Because what you said earlier with, you said you have friends outside of triathlon and, there's a number of different cues I think that you've given just from our conversation that show that you aren't fully wrapped up in that. But where did you adopt that mindset? Like, was this from mentorship? Was this something that just kind of became out of your own nature, or?
Um, I think I struggle with that to an extent, the sort of what you're describing there previously, what was shared to you by another athlete. I think that's normal. And I think embracing that that's normal is, a healthy thing to do.
Mhm.
You know, you did reach a goal that you were striving for a very long time since basically starting the sport. And now you have to figure something else to dedicate your time and energy towards. And looking at the next Olympics 4 years away is, that's a long time away to be like, okay, I'm going to dedicate, well, not to say that, but that every day I'm going to be 100% just focused on this one race 4 years away. You have to break that up into smaller chunks. Um, and I think before the Olympics, you can just push a lot of your problems to the side because you're so tunnel vision on this one thing, and everything else can wait. So if you have other obligations, that can wait. If you need to miss social things, that can wait. And to an extent, that does all of a sudden just come pouring back in. You've held the floodgates closed for a long
Mhm.
time, and then after the Olympics, those swing open, and all these sort of things come back into your life. I think in terms of balancing it and appreciating that balance that I think is required is partly from personal experience, a little bit from studying a little bit of sports psychology and understanding, that starting to identify yourself with your sport is not a healthy thing for long-term success. It's great when you're going well because then you feel great about yourself, but it limits your room to accept criticism, to move on from failure,
Mhm.
um, to, self-examine yourself and where you need to improve. And I think at the end of the day, this career is going to come to an end. You can't don't do triathlon until you're 80 years old, right? So there's a point where it's going to end, and you're going to have to grapple with that um, identity in some way or another. So I think it's a little bit of a mix. And one of the things that I found is that I tend to do best, and I think a lot of athletes tend to do best when they're in an environment that they feel happy, they feel supportive no matter their result. And I think a lot of that coincides with just having a little bit of support outside of the sport. So for me, like after the Olympics, I had some health issues that I need to get sorted out in Bermuda, but also just coming back home to be around friends and family, I think is something that's really healthy for me, to kind of decompress a little bit and yeah, just be outside of that bubble for a little bit of time and go back to living a normal life. So yeah, it's a mix.
So how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Getting back into the swing of things. I decided to call my season basically after the Olympics. Unfortunately, I've
Why
kind
do
of
you
had
say
it.
unfortunately?
I would have liked to continued, but I had a couple injury issues leading into the games that, end of a 4 year cycle. Now's the time to sort of address these things
Mhm.
before moving forward. So one of them, I broke my wrist 2 years ago, and it basically just never healed in the right way or at all. So, that's an issue. I have a bit of an Achilles issue that probably needs to get cleaned up. Maybe a little bit of a lingering artifact from a surgery that I had in my foot about 4 or 5 years ago. And
Wow.
yeah, so inside the cycle, there's very limited time to be able to rectify these things because you have to get the points. You have to just move to race to race to race. And it's like, it's very hard to properly fix any of these issues. So I was really lucky to work with some great people in strength and conditioning and physio that were able to kind of patch me together and get me across the line. Um,
Yeah.
but you can't just stay together on a sort of duct tape for the next 4 years, right? So I think this is a natural time to kind of make those changes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I hope that it all does get figured out. Sounds like you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's part of being an athlete, and a lot of people kind of have difficulty with this sort of stuff. And yeah, you almost think, damn, like, is this just me? And then you start speaking to people and you're like, it's actually pretty common for,
It
for
does
people to
seem.
do this sort of thing and take a step back. And, My physio was cracking me up the day. He was like, yeah, year after the Olympics, that's where everyone starts going crazy. Like, they do other things. Michael Phelps is out here smoking a bong. And he was like, don't go do that. But
Yeah,
he was basically like, Michael Phelps went from winning 8 gold medals to just partying, smoking bongs. And then he
yeah,
came back in London and he was still good. Okay. He's a freak of nature, but it's like,
yeah.
he's basically saying like, man, you don't want to just
You got to
be in
reset.
that. You gotta, otherwise that bubble's going to burst, and you don't want the bubble to burst in 2025, 2026 when things are just starting to get rolling.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are all like very high performance Rolls Royce, Mercedes Benz engines. Like I think of Formula One, like they literally rebuild that car before every single race. And if you guys are going 4 years without being able to take attention to whatever an Achilles
Yeah,
issue or whatever issue, like you got to get that stuff figured out.
exactly.
So I feel like this is an appropriate time to ask you, because we were talking about identity, talking about just some of the internal workings and thoughts and processes that you've been hashing through this Olympic Games cycle. But from your perspective, then I want to ask you the question: who is Tyler?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess, your identity is going to be built of a lot of different things. And for me, being an athlete is obviously a big part of that, but that's not everything. So I'm also a son, a brother, a friend, a Bermudian. There's a lot of things that sort of encompass who I am. I'm a nerd about like really weird sort of things. I just get into some like, I don't know. I like a lot of like weird, knowledgeable facts,
I dig it.
sort of like pub quiz sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, I would say I'm not super talented in a lot of things outside of triathlon. Like, not a great musician. We did have a little band going for a little while. I was on the bass,
Oh,
but
that's sick.
otherwise not a good musician.
Yeah. What did you play or
Not
sing or
like a
what?
good. No. I was, yeah, like bass guitar sort of thing.
Okay.
It's just like in our little sort of music group in school. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of other like hobbies that I have per se. I'm a crossword guy. I do enjoy the crossword.
Nice. Do you do the Wordle
Yeah, but I think that's two different, um,
pieces of the brain? I
like
wouldn't know because I don't
two
do
different
them.
pieces of brain. Yeah, that's what I would
Okay.
say. Yeah. So I do that. I enjoy that sort of stuff. I like traveling. I think that's a big thing that I enjoy about triathlon is getting to see different parts of the world, learn about different parts of the world. It's something that even when I'm finished triathlon, I'd love to keep doing, especially if I don't have to take a bike with me. Like, there's nothing that gets me more envious than seeing someone just like get to the airport, walk through security with a carry-on, and
Done.
not be taken at, not like, carrying this huge bike box around, a roller, foam rollers, massage guns, a whole bag full of bicarb and, electrolyte mix.
Yeah.
So that would be fun to just go do a little bit of exploring at some point without a bike.
So, what does success look like for you in the future, and like how has that changed in your mind over time? Because I'm sure Olympics was part of some of that, and now you've been there, you've done some of that. But how has that changed for you over time?
It's a good question again. You call it the stupid questions podcast, but man, these are good questions. Really making me think.
Okay.
I think success to me, um, it starts to become more about, can I think, do the sport sustainably, in the sense of like, can I support myself doing the sport? That becomes a big part of success. Can I just continue to get better? Can I start to help other people get better? Is something that I look at as a measure of success as I progress in my career. I'm 25 now, so kind of, I don't know, you're getting towards the sort of apex of your career before you start not winding things down. But I'm at a point now where there's someone that's 17, 18, 19. As a junior, hopefully I can help them progress their career. So that becomes important to me,
Mm.
whether that's someone in Bermuda or elsewhere. I think looking at the actual success at the end of the day, it does have to do with race results. Is I don't have to say, oh, success is independent from how you're doing the races. The point of training and putting this much time and effort into it is to get better and to get race results. So yeah, right now I'm just in the process of writing down what are the goals going forward. If I want to go for the LA Olympics, which I do, it's not just to go and represent and get the t-shirt sort of. It's to go there and to get a result. And you got to kind of set your expectations high. If you're going to put this much time and energy into it, you're going to request the other people that supported you to continue putting this much time and energy into your career development and helping you with, your coach, your physio, your strength coach, your sports psych, if you have one. So for me, that is also a big part of defining success, is actually looking at were you able to meet your goals. And obviously everyone's going to have different goals, and that's going to be based on, basically like what you're capable of actually doing. It's not really going to be feasible for everyone to win Olympic gold or to win a Kona or something like that. But success is basically defined by, did you meet your goal or did you not? And that's important to me as well. But there's other things, as I said, apart from just the races, that define whether or not I had a successful career. And I think back to what I was saying earlier is, can you walk away from your career? For me, I don't know if that's in 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and just be looked back on as someone that, was positive, raced with integrity, did all the sort of right things, and people enjoyed being around. You don't want to be that guy that's like, I'm done, and people are looking at him like, oh, wow, I'm glad we don't have to race that guy anymore. He was just terrible to hang around on the circuit. Yeah, hopefully remembered fondly amongst your peers when you retire.
Yeah, it's all part of that legacy. So I just turned 32 this past week, or this week, and it is, like I said, 32. I talk about this probably too much in the podcast. People might be a bit annoyed by it, but it's a big part of who I am. So I lost my dad when I was 16. So this is the first year where I've lived like 16 years with a dad, 16 years without dad. And so going forward, I feel like my body is young, but I feel like my mind is a lot older in a weird way. And a lot of people say kind of opposite of that. Like you talk to older people, are like, oh yeah, I'm still 16 in my brain. But I think about death a lot. Not like, oh, I'm just like concentrating on death, but I think about like what does life really mean to me? Like if I'm going to live my life to the best of my ability, now that I'm kind of going to this new phase, like if I'm going to be a dad potentially soon, I'm investing in these different parts of my career. But all of that to say, like I notice these patterns in my life, or like the ways that I think. And, sometimes my gut tells me to go one direction, but recognizing the pattern of, oh, I've been here before, and listening to that kind of inner voice, the small, still voice, whatever you want to call it, or that pattern recognition, like, oh, maybe I should do this other thing. Like I'm really trying to focus on that now as older I've gotten. So my question to you is, as you've gotten older, you're recognizing some of these patterns. I mean, you live a life that is, or you have lived a life that seems like it's very specific, like you're training at certain times of day, it's very cyclical, you're up and then you have down weeks, whatever. So have you recognized these types of ups and downs in your life, or the patterns in your life that have given you kind of a way to navigate? And I'm kind of having a hard time articulating this question. Did that
Yeah.
make any sense?
I think I know a little bit where you're coming from. I think we actually spoke about this a little bit when I was on with Justin and Chase. And actually, this is my favorite book right here. You talked about meditating on death, and this
Marcus
is,
Aurelius, yep.
yeah, a little bit of meditations. And it's interesting, kind of the big takeaway of that is, this is not an unlimited lifespan that we have. There's limited time that we have, and we really have to decide what's best to do with that time. And I think the big takeaway is that if you can find a goal or a purpose, then and devote your time to that, that's what constitutes a life well spent. If you can find something that you're passionate about, and you can spend your energy on, that's going to give your life some meaning. And it's not really worth worrying too much about your own like internal sort of anxieties because yeah, at the end of the day, we'll all pass. No one's going to remember this in 1,000 years from now, and even those people will eventually die. So it does sound a little bit morbid to kind of dwell on these sorts of things, but I think it just gives you that perspective of what's important and what's not important. And basically the most important thing is to live a virtuous life and one dedicated to a purpose or a passion, and ideally sort of in the aid of other people. So yeah. And then I guess kind of coming back to your thing about, do you recognize these sort of patterns? I think you do. And in relation to triathlon, I've been lucky enough to train with I can't believe how many good people I've trained with and been lucky enough to train with. And I never thought I would be able to train alongside these many Olympic medalists and know them and have like count some of them as like really good friends.
Yeah.
And I think you start to pick out what's in common with those people, what successful people, what sort of common traits successful people share with each other, I should say, and also maybe what doesn't work. And I think the key thing is just to always have that as a flexible model and not being like, okay, I'm not 21 anymore. I'm 25. Now I know it works, because guaranteed by the time you're 30, then you're going, okay, I'm 30 now, not 25. Now I really know it works. And then at 40, you're 40 and you're like, okay, now it's like, that's always something that's constantly got to be evolving. And I think you just got to keep yourself open to new ideas and understand, one of my favorite things in psychology is the Dunning-Kruger sort of curve where, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically, you sort of see people that, are very sort of new to a subject, immediately their confidence in that subject matter shoots up. And then as you start to learn more and more and more, it actually drops and you realize, oh, I actually don't know anything about anything. And then it kind of rebounds towards the end. But yeah, you basically don't want to find yourself in that model and kind of just accept that there's a lot of things you don't know. And I think that's, for me personally, I've put a lot more trust in someone that tells me like, hey, I don't know the answer to this, rather than someone that just tries to BS me pretty much and convince me that they're the smartest man in the universe. So I think that's something that I've kind of picked out.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I need to actually read that book. It's just it's not like written in a book format. Like it's kind of just chunks, right? Or
no, it's a good book because you can. I mean, the story is he never intended this to be published. This is basically his journal to himself.
Yeah.
So, and then, it's a translation from Greek to, he was Roman, but he wrote in Greek because that was like the academic language. It was a translation from Greek to English, so there's a lot of, hyperbole. There's a lot of sort of analogies, allegories, that sort of thing. But the cool thing is you can read it a bunch of times and you pick out something different from it each time you read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I bring it with me wherever I go. It's a good one. Yeah.
That's awesome. Who introduced it to you, or how'd you find it?
I had a good friend that was into philosophy when we were at school. So he was, someone that first brought up the name. I had a really good, I guess like a humanities teacher. I guess it's like social studies or history sort of combination when I was at school. That also introduced me to sort of that sort of way of thinking, perhaps. And then I returned to it just listening to a podcast maybe before COVID or during COVID when everyone was probably listening to 20 podcasts a day. And that's where I kind of got back into it. I said, oh, I'll reopen it and dive back into it and see if you can pick something out of it at a different part of your life. Obviously, what you take from it as 16 years old versus 20 years old versus 25 years old is going to be completely different based on the life experiences that you've now had,
Yeah, life experience. It's interesting how, the older we get, the more we do experience, we can think back on times in our lives. And like you're saying, similar with this book, but draw a completely new lesson just because our horizons have broadened. I really appreciate that. I wonder, like, it would be so interesting to me to have the life experience of like an 85 90-year-old today. I mean, think about what they've lived through and be able to observe the world through their lens in this moment. So interesting.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It is fascinating. Like, I was at my granddad's 90th birthday the other week, and
Oh, wow.
they had a list of things like in 1934. This was the price of a car, this is the price of a house, and you're just like, wow, you've seen a lot, and you think
Yeah.
about like the internet has only been around for a third of your life. You were 60 basically when people started really getting online, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you see so many things, and you just wonder, you know, what's it going to be like in another 60 years from now?
Yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. So let me ask you this question. Are you religious?
Not particularly. I think, I guess you could say I was raised in the context of like a Judeo-Christian culture.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly Bermuda is quite a religious place.
Cool.
We're quite a conservative country, I would say, in terms of our beliefs. But me particularly, I've been to church a number of times, but I'm not really a particularly
Mm-hmm.
religious person, and it's something I'm still, yeah, I still try to, you know, grapple with and navigate a little bit in my own personal life.
Yeah. Do you believe in God?
That's a difficult question. I don't think
A God?
uh, yeah, no, I think that's a really difficult question for me to answer. I don't think I believe in a God um, that is presented, in the Bible necessarily, as it is presented in the Bible necessarily. I don't know if I'd go as far to say that,
Yeah.
but as I say, that's an evolving thing, and I have good friends that have literally told me in the last year they had a not an epiphany, but a
Some kind of experience or a miracle
like
or something like that.
literally a coming to Jesus moment, and they
Hmm.
change the trajectory of their life and become devout Christians. Or, I know other people in other religions that have become devout Muslims after an experience. So it's something
Hmm.
I'm always open to. Yeah.
Have you had any personal experiences that have given you an inclination of one direction or the other where like, maybe it's not a thing, or maybe there is a being out there?
I find theology very interesting.
Mhm.
You know, you think about what are the odds of being around at this time of, where we are in human history, all these sorts of things. And it does make you question, is there something greater? Is there something beyond this? And I have no idea. I'm as
Mhm.
interested in the idea of a God as I am in simulation theory, as I am in
Mhm.
these theories around sort of multiverses, um, you
Mhm.
know, things like Fermi's paradox. Why haven't we found other intelligent
Other
life?
life, yeah.
All that sort of stuff really fascinates me. And I think it comes down to this, intuitive man's sort of, or woman's person's, you know, search for purpose and meaning. And that's what people have been doing all throughout history. And then it comes kind of back to the philosophical discussion we were having earlier, which is why you're fortunate when you can find a purpose very early on in life. And for me, I feel like I haven't really got there yet. I feel like devoting a lot of your time to one craft, like triathletes do, or any
Mhm.
athletes do, is something that we're really blessed to be able to do, because it does fulfill that sense of a purpose, at
Yeah.
least at this stage in life. What that
Mhm.
becomes in 5, 10, 20, 30 years might shift, but at least for now, you have an idea of what your aims are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I really quick, I just wanted to say, so your book, I'm gonna actually check it out, by Marcus Aurelius Meditations. But it reminds me of, so I grew up in like a Judeo-Christian home, um, in what I would consider a pretty conservative segment of Christianity called Adventism or Seventh Adventism. But my parents were like, they were first generation once they were after 17, 18, 20s. I don't know. I can't even remember. Like they kind of came into that world. So they had more of the secular mindset and all that stuff. So I had this interesting kind of growing up where my parents would kind of swing back and forth between like, religion is everything for us and then it's not. And so I saw this rainbow of examples.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
one thing that was taught to us. She's like, yeah, you should read the Bible. Like that should be your meditation. So there's this book called Ecclesiastes written by King Solomon. And it's very similar, I would say, in the tone that Marcus Aurelius' book is, because it's written by King Solomon during a depressing time in his life, where basically he has verses were saying, everything under the sun is meaningless. There's nothing new under the sun. And it's just kind of like this lamentation of life is pointless. Like, because he supposedly was the richest man in all the world, had all the wives, had everything that a man's heart or woman's desire, or woman's heart could desire. But then he writes this book, which is really interesting. So you should check it out. I think you find it interesting. But yeah, no, it's super fascinating conversations. You sound like someone who may listen to like Lex Friedman or have you heard of Lex Friedman?
Yeah, I've come across him a couple times. I think he's an interesting guy. He's one that I'll listen to on a plane, maybe. Like, he's not the type of guy to plug in for a 4-hour ride. Just his tone and you look down listening to that guy on a 4-hour ride, you'd probably be doing 100 watts and scratching your chin. Like, wow, that is an interesting point. But no, I enjoy sort of those guys, and these kind of polyglots, for lack of a better term, that delve into a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of math, examine sort of the cultural landscape of our times, that sort of thing. It does interest me. I guess that's what I mean in terms of like, I think triathletes, it's an interesting sport because you're training and then there's a lot of resting. So, you have a little bit of time to absorb a lot of information and kind of, in a way, I don't know. I enjoy it. I enjoy it as a nice contrast to training hard is listening to this sort of stuff and learning more about, the sort of things that might come up on a podcast like his.
Yeah. What's your favorite podcast
to listen to?
Yeah.
Stupid questions, man.
Yeah, right. You and 5 others.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite or do you not have a favorite?
It depends. Different things for, different
moods.
Moods. Yeah. Love them or hate them. I think if you can get some pretty entertaining Joe Rogans, especially that's more listening to it for the guest and to say what they have to say. Because I actually think he is a great interviewer and gets a really interesting perspective on a lot of people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. I think, in touching with this sort of the meditation stuff, Daily Stoic is a nice one to listen to if you're in the car. It just gives you pretty much a little verse and an interpretation from the book almost every day, but that's like a 5-10 minute podcast. It barely counts.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, that's good. I'm trying to just go through. I gotta almost open up my Spotify, but yeah, don't worry. Don't worry too much.
You have to shoot me some of them because I'm curious to hear what you're listening to.
Yeah, I listened to the was the Triathlon hour in that. That's always interesting because you can get a good recap of like what happened on the weekend.
Yeah, industry news.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but try not to. I like Lantern Rouge cycling podcast as well because it's just you get into the whole cycling world and they can give you a good deep dive on how whatever stage went in whatever tour. So yeah.
Cool, man. Sweet. Well, one final question for you, and then I'll let you go. It's an advice question. So I want you to pretend that there is a 15-year-old promising and interested triathlete who comes up to you and just idolizes you. He's like, Tyler, I'm going to go to the Olympics. What do I need to do? What advice do you have for me? What would you tell him?
Depends where they're coming from. It depends what their background is, if they're starting fresh or if they're starting new. But I think in general, it would be to... Man, there's so many things. How would I just narrow it down to one sort of concise point?
You're never going to see him again.
I think it's going to be surround yourself with people better than you and continue to challenge yourself on a daily basis and never be afraid of failure. And I think if you have that point and you're just looking for better people to train with, looking for good coaches, looking for good training environments, that'll lead you down the right path and you'll just learn so much more from those individual people than one person could ever tell you. So if you're just with that mentality of, I'm not afraid to fail. If I rock up to this run session with this group of guys that are a lot better than me and they drop me on the first 400, that's all right. Next week I'll come back and I'll make it 400. Next week, 600, and eventually in 2-3 years time, you can do a whole track session with these guys. And that's not possible if you're so afraid to ever even do one rep with them or turn up to the session that you would never make that progress.
Good advice. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for coming on and letting me dive into your life and for sharing so freely. All the best to you. I hope that everything gets figured out with the Achilles and with the wrist, and that you come back swinging super hard, and looking forward to hopefully getting to meet you in person again before too terribly long. But thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Seth. It was a fun chat.
Thank you so much to Tyler for coming on the pod and letting me dive into who he is as an individual. I really appreciate the deep conversations around philosophy and life and death and all of these different things. I think it adds a lot of savory flavor to the conversations because it allows me to just talk about deep things that, I don't know, I think should be talked about more. So want to leave you with a little bit of the advice, though, when talking to Tyler and asked him if someone is wanting to be an Olympian, what advice did he have? And he came down to one simple phrase: surround yourself with people that are better than you. And I think that that is an awesome piece of advice that we could take through triathlon, through business, through religion, through whatever it is, whatever aspect of life that you want to do. Surround yourself with people who are better than you, and you will never stop learning. Thank you so much to all of you who made it to this point in the podcast. Just want to say that you are what make this possible. If you could like, comment, subscribe, review, comment, any of those things would be really awesome, because it helps to continue to grow and spread awareness of the podcast. And I appreciate that, because making these things isn't free, but it's super fun, and I really appreciate it. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can do that at this stupidquestions.show website. Thank you so much, and we will catch you in the next one.